Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Civic Center Hotel. This is today the opening of an additional 93 units of navigation center supportive beds and units for our homeless. And it's been about a year, almost a year and a half, since we opened up the first navigation center at 16th and Mission, and it's what our friends are calling a radical hospitality approach with a lot of warm, supportive services to support people getting off the streets and into really establishing the new lives. Jeff Kaczynski, our new director of homelessness, Gail Gilman, who's the head of CHP, our community housing partners, that's managing this building. We were just in a brief discussion with a couple of the residents in this building, and it's always more than amazing. I think we have to appreciate where people are coming from. With someone like Jean or Elena, two of the names of who we met with, one's been homeless kind of in and out. The other has been homeless for over 10 years, and something happened to them, where there was a loss of jobs, loss of their apartment unit, the inability to afford the new units, forced them to live on the streets. And I think as we went through some of their lives, they obviously were extremely concerned for their own safety being on the streets. So these navigation centers are extremely important to the city, and yet they have to be not only a good place of strong supportive services and places for people to be in that are safe, they also have to be backed up with, I think, the very true promise, a promise that you can literally see in the eyes of Elena and Jean just a few minutes ago, that they truly hope to be independent on their own feet and be able to live their lives out in a very positive way. This is what the Nav Center starts people in doing with the supportive services, and we'll have more to say about that. But this is our second navigation center. It will be here for about 2, maybe up to 3, but mostly probably around 2 years, while we work with the owners. The owners of the Civic Center is the Plumbers Union Trust Fund, working in partnership with a private developer called Strata. Michael Cohen's here representing them today, working together with the community housing partnerships to provide this particular navigation center service on site, but at the same time, they will be building about 100 to 110 supportive units of housing for our formerly homeless in about a couple of years. They're going through their entitlement process. It will not be at this particular building, it will be behind it, but on the same development site, as housing will be about over 500 units of residential housing, but there'll be at least 110 here. Plus, in addition to that, some inclusionary housing that is part of the 550 units of housing for all different levels of income. This is an agreement that they have made through the planning process, through the neighborhood. There has been a lot of smiles that this hotel was taken over with the Navigation Center, because it had been essentially a house of a lot of challenges in the past years, and I think the neighbors have welcomed the Navigation Center to be here. Navigation centers, as I said earlier, is our city's a way of really helping people navigate all the different support that they need to have before they can live more independent lives. We are contemplating and working with the neighborhood in the Dog Patch area for a third site for Navigation Center, and their Public Works is taking the lead with the relationship building with our neighborhood services office, homeless outreach offices, and of course the Department of Homelessness that Jeff Kaczynski is heading up. I want to say thank you to DPW, to Plumbers Union, Trust Fund, to Strata, of course to the community housing partnerships for creating yet this another opportunity. A lot of lives will be saved because of these navigation centers and the way we operate them. Helping people get out of the danger of living on the streets It's an incredible, life-changing episode in their lives. Again, as testified to by Jean and Elena just a few minutes ago, and I know by countless others who will have the opportunity to live here. There's an ongoing improvements to this building, but right here, just literally weeks ago, this was a storage facility of the entire building, and there was no daylight in the storage room, and mattresses and all the other things that were being stored there. And now it's going to be a very bright, happy community room for our residents, our visitors, who are on their way to living out their lives in a much more positive way. I want to particularly thank CHP because they are leading the effort to manage this building. The improvements are done by a partnership with the private contractors, with the plumbers union, with Public Works. But ultimately, the programming will be done through community housing partnerships. I want to thank them because their leadership is not just this particular building. Gail Gilman, who's the CEO, and CHP has been a partner with a lot of our low-income affordable housing all over the city. And they've had some very choice projects that they've not only done, they're managing them, and the people that are living in all these buildings are extremely thankful for not just their management, but for the collaboration between Public Health, who's here today, Public Works, our Human Services, our outreach teams. I want to say one more thing that I know Jeff and others will say too, is I want to say a special thank you to the HOT teams that are out there outreaching every single day to people on our streets. They really deserve a hero's thank you from the city, and I want to be the first to say thank you because these are not easy jobs. Housing our homeless, supporting our homeless is one of the toughest things that this city can and has to do. And I am thankful to all the media for converging this week, if not these several weeks, to help us identify solutions, but also bring to light the things that we are doing. I want to talk about the progress that we are making because there is true progress made. When you look at the numbers and you kind of think, well, maybe negatively, the numbers haven't changed or maybe they've increased on homelessness, you have to understand what's happening in every other major city, particularly on the West Coast, where there's a 21% surge of increase in homelessness. That holding the line and holding it where we're at is true progress. Thousands of lives that we have saved and that are improving in the permanent supportive housing that we are creating. And we struggle with that. I'm going to keep asking the SRO owners to give us up even more units that we can master lease. We're going to have to think creatively in the near future. We're already in many meetings about modular housing and approaches to find less expensive housing to make sure that we can do everything we can to bring to bear the permanent supportive housing that we need. And with that, I want to say thank you again to all of our partners. And you'll hear from several of them now. And I'd like to introduce a great partner. Gail Gilman, as I explained earlier, is not just a partner, she's an honoree of mine for Women's History Month, because she happens to be another yet good example of women who are empowering others, but leading her and having her leadership abilities recognized is, I think, really important in this ongoing discussion about who our real partners are in solving homelessness for each individual, for a veteran, for a family. All of these have to come together even better. So let me introduce to you today Gail Gilman.
Thank you, Mayor Lee. And I too just want to thank a couple of people. I stood here 6 weeks ago with the mayor when we had this ambitious plan to take the 93 units that were offline at this property and not just use them as temporary housing for individuals experiencing homelessness, but really the mayor and his team had the foresight to say, let's bring the services, let's bring the concept of a navigation center into four walls into this building. And to do that, we had a lot of work. And to be honest, I wasn't sure we'd meet the mayor's deadline of July 1st, bringing this together. And I could have not done that without some people who I just feel I really need to thank. First of all, again, I want to thank Local 38, who owns this site and owns this building, the Plumbers Union, and their pension fund, who really saw a crisis, and as a private partner, as labor stepped up to say they would help the city. And I want to thank Strata Investment Group, who we are partnering on the permanent development of this site, for really helping shepherd that to the plumbers, having them realize that we all have a civic responsibility when we're facing the crisis of homelessness. And then I want to thank also our partners on the ground who made this possible. First of all, I need to say, we would have never been able to work on this project and expedite it in the way we had if it hadn't been for the great leadership at DPW, Mohammed, and particularly Paul on his team, who designed this space and made it look as beautiful and light as it is today. I want to thank our other partner in the project, which is the John Stewart Company, and to Armando and Robert on the ground, who are managing this building on our behalf. Really want to thank you for all of your work. And now I have to thank the CHP team, who for the last 6 weeks have been working tirelessly to get this project together, but also to ramp up the service provision. We will be providing social workers on site from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week. We had a massive amount of staff to hire up and train, and I want to thank Amy on my team, Anat, Jasmine, Daphne, Joss, Maximilian, Katie, and Alfonso for making this possible and making the lives of Jeans and others better. Briefly, Community Housing Partnership's mission is that we help homeless people secure housing and become self-sufficient. And what we've learned through the lessons of the Navigation Center on Mission Street is that individuals breaking out of street homelessness need a pathway. They need a runway to restabilize and get their lives back on track. And we know that the units we're providing here, the services we're providing here, will help probably hundreds of people over the next 2 years have that runway, have that space to rebuild their lives. Gene said it best when we were speaking to him earlier today. He said, "Now I can breathe." Thank you. And I want to introduce our final speaker and someone who we're really excited about, who's taking on a brave new leadership role in the city. And if any man can do it, he can. Jeff Kaczynski, the Director of Homelessness and Supportive Housing.
Thank you, Gail, and thank you, Mayor Lee, for the opportunity to lead this new department. This is an exciting day, not just because of the opening of this new navigation center, because it's not just about the 2 centers we have opened or the ones that we are going to open. It's really about redesigning the entire system, and the navigation centers is exactly the model that we should be pursuing. It's a low barrier to entry program where people can come as they are, with their partners, with their pets, with their possessions, with very limited or very small requirements, if no requirements, to get into this program. Once they get here, all the services are on site and available to them so that they can find their pathway to permanent housing. And that's exactly how the entire homeless services system should work. And the mayor and I have taken to calling it a navigation system, which is what we're going to be developing over the next year with the creation of this new department. But today I wanted to talk about another issue, a related issue, and that's the issue of encampments that have been on our streets. This has been a growing problem that many San Franciscans are concerned about. The mayor and I spoke about this on my first day of work, and we both agree, and I'm sure all of you do as well, that having people living in tents on the streets in conditions that are unsafe, that are dangerous, where there's high incidence of crime and high incidence of sexual assault, where people have no place to take care of their personal hygiene, that's not safe for the people who are in those encampments. It's not healthy, and it's certainly not a humane way for us to address the problem of homelessness, and we need to address the issue of encampments. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we sometimes forget in this debate that the people who are living around the encampments, that the businesses that are affected by the encampments are also victims in this narrative. They're having their neighborhoods, their businesses, their homes disrupted. They may feel that it's unsafe, unsecure, and they're not sure what's going on. And the mayor and I, along with other department heads, are committed to working to address this issue. So today I'm very happy to announce the formation of an encampment response team, which is going to be led by my former and future colleague, Jason Albertson, who's in the back there. Jason, as many of you may know, has been working in homelessness for many years. He's one of the best social workers I've had the opportunity to work with. with. Funny thing is, I believe Jason was Gail's first supervisor at Community Housing Partnership back in the day, where he worked. And Jason also spent many years as a member of the HOT team and as part of the leadership of the HOT team. And recently has been working with law enforcement on the peninsula, working with calls related to homelessness and mental health. So he is very well positioned to lead this team. Our plans have not been completely developed yet. Jason begins in the middle of July, but by the middle of August, we'll have this team up and running. We certainly are not going to be criminalizing people on the streets. We are not going to be asking people to move without having a place for them to go. Programs like this and the new navigation center we're working on in the dog patch, as well as our existing shelter system and some other ideas that we are working on, are going to create places where people can go, where they can essentially be triaged, where we can figure out how we can help them at least get into a longer term shelter, but hopefully into permanent supportive housing. So I'm very excited about this opportunity and look forward to working with Jason and to seeing some progress on this issue. And with that, I'll take a few questions.
Can you define exactly what this facility, where along the line in transition does this help people? You're not just putting people off the streets, according to the...
Yeah, that's correct. So the idea of the Navigation Center, again, is a low barrier to entry shelter, essentially. It's temporary housing. But once folks get here, there are services available to them that are going to lead them towards housing, whether it's to help them if they're eligible for Social Security, for example. If they're looking to find a job, we can get them into job training so they can go out and find their own housing. If they want to return back to another community, if they've got family or friends in another place that we know is willing to take them in, we can use the Homeward Bound program. And of course, we also have access to permanent supportive housing, of which the city has close to 7,000 units where we can place individuals. So far in the Navigation Center at 1950 Mission, 83% of the people who have come through that center have landed into permanent housing. Whether through Homeward Bound or whether into permanent supportive housing. And we're looking to replicate that not just here, but at all of our shelters and all of the future navigation centers. The idea is to not have people cycling through the system, but to get them indoors, help them get the services they need, and help them find the runway to permanent housing.
How challenging is it to find housing?
Yes. Very, very. And we need to be as creative as we possibly can on how we address this. And the city has lots of arrows in our quiver. In addition to the Homeward Bound program, and in addition to the permanent supportive housing that we master lease or that we purchase, run by organizations like CHP and Tenderloin Housing Clinic and Episcopal Community Services, we also have a program called Rapid Rehousing, which works really well. And what that does is figures out the gap between their what they can afford now in rent and what it might be in 2 years once they have a job. And we'll close that gap and provide them a temporary rent subsidy. We have realtors that will help them find apartments. Oftentimes it's not in San Francisco, it may be somewhere else in the Bay Area, but then we provide services in their home so that they can become self-sufficient. And at Hamilton Family Center, where I used to work, even though families could be in that program for up to 2 years, the average length was only 15 months. Families were able to get stable, get self-sufficient, and move on with their lives. So we're going to look at all different kinds of options. It can't just be about building more housing. We need to do that, but we need to be creative around finding exits for folks. And one more question.
Yeah, is it possible we all as a community could stop outsourcing jobs in our country so we can bring jobs back to America so that the homeless at the bottom of the line can fuel a better life?
Yeah,
Donald Trump.
Yeah. So look, the homelessness was caused by a lot of what you're talking about, changes in our economic system that has started in the 60s and that led to a reduction in investments in affordable housing by HUD, a retreat from providing the mental health services that are needed in our community. These are all big problems that we need to address. And organizations like Community Housing Partnership and others certainly do their best to create jobs for formerly homeless individuals. They have a social enterprise called Solutions SF, which actually creates employment opportunities. But I will say that this department's job and what I've been charged with is not to try to fix challenges in our economic system. I'll certainly be a loud voice for that. But my job, today, tomorrow, and in the future is really about how do I get folks how do we get folks as a community who are on the streets into programs like this and into permanent housing? Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question.
How many people are going to be on Jason's team, and how's it going to work?
We're still working on the details, Kevin, but we will let you know as soon as we figure it out. But it will be members of the HOT team, individuals from the police department and DPW, and we're also talking to the fire department and others about what's the right mix.
Group on the streets today, and you had said you're not going to make anybody move unless they have a place to go.
Yep.
So if you put them out today, would they have any place to go, or are you full?
No, we're not full. So there's a couple of things that we're looking at. One is this center, as well as sites at the navigation center, as well as, our shelter system is generally full. But we do run like a 3 to 5% vacancy on any given night. We want to make sure there's 0% vacancy, so we'll be utilizing those shelter beds, better managing the system to make sure every bed is used on any given night. And we're also looking at opening up another navigation center, as well as we're planning to experiment around some other shelter designs. But I don't want to necessarily talk about those until we've figured out a little bit more. But sorry, Gil. Helpful.
So currently, right now, there are 55 navigation center clients staying with us, and we have 48 rent-paying tenants who were living at the property prior to our management.
Okay, that's it for questions.
Okay, thank you very much.